right, guys, welcome back to the Gym Goss podcast. You are here with myself, Jacob Skepis, Samuel Skepis, Jackson Pios, and our special guest today, Dr. Mike Israetel. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Jacob.
And on today's episode, we are going to talk to Mike about hypertrophy roadblocks. So, all of the challenges and obstacles that somebody may face on their journey to Swole City. So, we'll start with some of the training related obstacles or roadblocks, Mike. And let's begin with somebody who's very early in their lifting career. What are some of the most common roadblocks that you see to lifters trying to get bigger and build as much muscle as possible when they're just starting out?
Early in the career, I think there are a few. Now, these aren't systematic or anything like that, but I'll just rattle off a few that come to mind. One is definitely a lack of knowing what your program is and just going in and doing stuff. And it becomes very difficult to do a few things. One major one is to figure out what works and what doesn't, or what seems to work better and what seems to work worse. So if you have enough randomness inserted into a semblance of a program, you really kind of get results and you don't sort of know why, because you never apply anything for a long enough time to see if that's what's really doing it. And then if the results ever stop coming for whatever number of reasons, I suppose this is a deeper philosophical point, you actually can't fall back on figuring out why you don't have results. Like ask someone what's if someone walked up to one of you guys and was like, hey, like I'm really stalling my training, you'd probably ask, what's your training like? And if they can't give like a remotely cogent answer as to what they do, because they just do different stuff all the time every week, yeah, it becomes really difficult to even give advice, because who knows what they've been doing. If you come to the doctor and you say you're sick, they're a lot of times probably trying to get you to say symptoms and what do you like when you're well. But if you're never well, geez, everything the doctor says, like, well, your knee seems flared up. You're like, oh, that's from older. That's not an injury. That's not why I'm here. He's just going to get really confused as to what's your normal state. So if you don't have a baseline, it's really difficult to problem shoot. And so I would say one of the biggest problems is the lack of consistency. So probably my number one piece of advice to folks looking for answers about how to get over some plateaus is, stabilize your training, apply your training in a relatively linear or at least stable manner for some number of weeks, if not months. And then you can start to make regular observations about where you seem to be kind of bugged. So if you do a given program and you now know what that program is and you still don't make any gains, somebody could at least ask you questions about what your program's like. And then let's say you're saying, well, I do one set of chest a week, a set of legs a week, a set of back a week, and I just go home. But each set's really hard. Somebody could say, oh, it's probably not enough volume or frequency. And they're probably correct, but if you're all over the map, the first big problem is that you're all over the map. Um, that's probably a pretty decent insight, I think. Maybe worth repeating.
Awesome. And in terms of the intermediate stage, would you say that the problem still continues to exist for most lifters outside of, I guess, competitive athletes or even competitive athletes? Are they still failing to track and measure the big rocks of their program?
I think intermediates do that a lot better, generally speaking. Where intermediates tend to falter, I think, more often is they tend to run progressions and have expectations like they did when they were beginners and continuously rerun themselves into the same wall, because their fatigue accumulation is more intense, their adaptive magnitudes are not as great. So what ends up happening is they'll say, I'm really just stuck. They say, okay, how stuck are you? They're like, well, I used to put 10 pounds on my squat every week and now it's only 5. And you're like, okay, you're not really stuck. You're just getting to know the fact that gains are a bit harder. And sometimes if you try to add 10 pounds a week to your squat, it throws off your reps in reserve. You end up grinding into failure a lot more. And instead of having really productive 4 to 6 week mesocycles, you have like 2 to 3 week mesocycles and you overreach. You could even get a little hurt, like just trying to get really expecting the same rate of gain. So I think a big problem with intermediates is that they fail to settle into realistic expectations. And concomitantly, another big problem with intermediates is a failure to lift up the other parts of their supplementary inputs that generally sort of take care of themselves or are irrelevant when you're beginners. For example, if you're an intermediate and you got pretty big as a beginner just by eating whatever, you may be making very few gains, and now you have to look at your daily protein, your caloric intake, your consistency, your meal number, your sleep, your recovery. Like a lot of us, went to college and partied and trained, and because it was our first few years of training, we got pretty jacked. But then, you're grad school or you're in your first job and you're still partying and it's always fun. But the uh, the inputs just aren't there anymore as far as recovery and nutrition. And then you're an intermediate, and you may even think the problem is training, which it could be, but it could just be that your sort of next level of holistic recovery and nutrition just hasn't jumped with you. And now's the time to figure out details. I actually remember one gentleman, just it's quite a curious conversation. He told me he really didn't enjoy being an intermediate, even though he had freaky genetics and he was enormous already, because he really missed the noob gains and how easy they were, and he didn't like working for his gains. And I was like, no, you're never going to amount to fit in this sport. And surprised he didn't. So I think a big part of being an intermediate is understanding that you have to expect less and give more, which is kind of like my last failed marriage. You know what I mean? Hey, oh, a little self-deprecating humor here. No big deal. Just kidding. No one would ever marry me except for my current wife. So, but yeah, that's kind of the deal. I think that's a big deal with intermediates. Is when I ever talk to intermediates and they give me stink about how little progress they're making, and so on and so forth, I try to actually find out if they're running what I would call an intermediate level of intervention. And oftentimes we find they're running a beginner level of intervention and expecting beginner level results, which no longer work.
Awesome. And Jackson, is it fair to assume that a lot of your clientele are probably late intermediate stages? You've got some early advanced clients as well, but mostly intermediate. Do your experiences echo that of Mike's? Is there anything else that you want to add to that? Some of the issues you see with their training?
Yeah, they do. One other thing I'll add is that I think as we progress through our training age, being very in tune with our training intensity becomes more and more important. Like when we're in the beginner newbie stages, you sort of don't really have to throw down too hard in the gym, and some gains are going to flow relatively seamlessly. But I think as we get more advanced through the training cycle, being able to push limits and know what pushing limits in a set actually looks like becomes very, very important. Now, I've heard people criticize like Mike and Jared's training, saying it's like easy training because they're leaving reps in the reserve. But because they actually understand what true failure looks like, a couple reps in reserve when training like that is actually extremely, extremely difficult. And when training intensely, and I'm talking intensity of effort here, when training intensely, like a large proportion of your set is going to fucking hurt, and I think what holds a lot of people from going from like the intermediate level to the advanced level is they're just not really familiar or accustomed to dealing with that discomfort for a long period of time. And I think that's what's separating that next leg up. Like I've trained with a lot of people in my time, and what I've noticed is that a lot of people cut their sets very, very short. And when sort of a little bit of discomfort starts to kick in, it's like, oh, fuck, that doesn't feel too nice. Let's end it there. But in reality, to become sort of an advanced lifter, I think once that first sort of discomfort kicks in, you've got a hell of a lot more to go before the set's actually complete.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think learning how to gauge intensity of efforts and knowing when to strike and when to dial back very much aligns with what Mike's statement earlier, that they keep either just plowing themselves into the ground or not training hard enough. And I think there's a lot of psychological factors, environmental factors as well, that sort of lend themselves to which end of that spectrum people will find themselves on. But in either case, that can be a huge roadblock to further progress. Mike, how do you propose that somebody starts to navigate those kind of issues? If they're not training hard enough, how do they go about training harder if there is some psychological barrier that is preventing them from getting through that discomfort? And I guess then we can tackle the other side of the spectrum, where if somebody's training too hard, too frequently, digging themselves recovery holes that they can't climb out of, how do they course correct and start dialing back appropriately?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing that has to be in before you push someone harder is their technique has to be stable and good. And that's not very hard to do. Most exercises are pretty easy to teach. Bodybuilding is not very athletic, so you don't have to have some kind of magic. But despite that, a lot of folks who are on an IFBB pro stage, I would say pretty categorically, do not know how to lift weights properly. Like, legitimately just don't. And wildly, can't coach anyone, can't barely coach themselves. Then learning good technique first is essential. So you're targeting the muscles that you want safely and effectively. And the second thing is once that's established, and hopefully it's established in the beginner phase, once you get in the intermediate phase, you can do something that we do a lot at RP, which is like the rep match or beat system. And just add one, two and a half kilos every week to whatever implement you're using, or 5 kilos, depending on what it is. Leg press would be 5 kilos, 2.5 kilos for a bench press or shoulder press or something. And the goal is just to get the same number of reps you did last week. And that goal is taken very seriously. And if you get the same number of reps you did last week, great, that's good enough. You can stop right there. Now, as you guys can probably tell, at some point you either become infinitely strong, like Jackson and I are trying with our Dragon Ball Z journeys, or you simply hit failure, or you give up. Right? That's the other more politically incorrect option. I say I just couldn't do it today. Well, then you feel the full brunt of failure because sets are no longer subjective. Like, oh, it's good set, good set. Because it's easy to say it's a good set when you don't count reps, you don't count sets, you don't log anything. Guys will be like, man, it was a great workout, and they're not writing anything down. I'm like, how do you know? Compared to what? So I think when you start writing your reps and sets down, then there's the expectation that as long as the mesocycle is progressing, as long as you're working with your chosen exercises, it's not deload week yet, you either add weight and keep the reps the same, or you keep the weight the same and add like a rep every time, add a rep every time. You started with a set of 15 on the leg press, 180 kilos, you stay at 180 kilos, and after 5 weeks, you're at set to 20 or something like that. And you can only keep going up like that for long enough until you either give up, in which you will feel the burden of having failed yourself, which is pretty good incentive for most people to at least not try to give up often, and or you go to ischemic rigor and muscular failure, and then you can't do it anymore, and you're like, well, I gave it my all and I couldn't do it, time to deload, right? Or time to manage fatigue in some other way. And I think that really sets up a really cool thing. But the last thing I'll say is, in order to not allow that middle option to happen of you just giving up, I think it's good to be in a personal culture and a gym culture which rewards trying, right? So, like, for example, if I'm a beginner intermediate, let's say I'm an intermediate and I'm working out with Sam over here, and he's watching me squat, and I turn to him before I do the set. I'm like, set of 10. This is set of 10. Like, as 7, 8, and 9 come up, I understand that Sam's not going to exactly shake my hand if I just quit at 8. He's going to be like, or he's not going to say anything, or he'll do the worst possible thing, which is like, yeah, good set. And he may even do the Australian ultimate insult, which is good set, mate. And you're like, mate, motherfucker, we're not mates. Fuck out of my face. So, so then you don't want to hear that, and so you're in the culture of like, people expect at whatever goal it is you set that you will achieve it. You will at least try really hard. And then if you're in that culture, whether it's a coach or a trainer or the gym you train at, or even in your own head, then that is a really good way to getting out of the RIR trap and pushing a little further, a little further, a little further until you find your limits.
Awesome. Yep. I think bringing some more objective measures can definitely help remove some of that subjectivity. Samuel, I know that you have training partners such as Martin and Jason, and you three regularly force and push yourselves to the limits and don't let volitional interruption impede your performance. So do you want to talk about some of the, I guess, more pragmatic things that you guys are doing when you're training to ensure that you're not slacking off, even though that most of you aren't? Well, Martin's an intermediate. You're
Martin's I don't like that
Martin's
guy at all.
always an intermediate. So I have like one preliminary thought here is that like when a lot of people start lifting, like in the very early stages of their career, they generally start with someone else. So most people are starting with a training partner, which could really, explain why, even if their training's like completely sporadic, they're just going in and doing whatever someone else is doing. They're not recording anything themselves, but they're getting these, really good gains. I think obviously the vast majority of that's coming down to the fact that they're just a beginner and getting newbie gains, but it could also be resultant from training with someone and training hard and having that accountability. Like no one wants to fucking let someone else down, be it a coach or someone you're training with, or feel like, I should have got 10 there or something. That's what I told them, like, in Mike's example. So yeah, definitely in the last probably year, like when Jacob and I started training together, he was my training partner. I wasn't logging training or anything then. We just trained together and we trained fucking hard. And then I think as a lot of people progress to that intermediate stage, it's nearly like a Dunning-Kruger sort of thing. They kind of go, oh, I start to know more. I don't need to train as hard because, I was progressing really well. But I definitely think there is a lot of merit to having some degree of external accountability. Obviously, we want to internally be accountable to ourselves and our goals and things like that. But having a training partner or a coach, someone who's there kind of with you, even if they're not doing the same session, aligning training with someone else at the gym, again, that kind of cultural thing that Mike spoke about can be very largely beneficial. I think it's something we see at our facility, Jacob, like, people come in and they align training with other people, even if they're not on, following the exact same program. They'll get a spot, they'll, get encouragement, make sure they're pushing with each other. I think it's very much beneficial to that accountability and, not letting yourself off the hook in terms of, training sufficiently hard. And it also helps, I guess, for, the latter part of your question, it also can prevent people from just training too hard unnecessarily. Like, again, it's just like you get this feedback from an external source saying, okay, I think that was like, you said you wanted an 8. I think that was about an 8. Like, you don't have to don't do any more reps because you're potentially going to be overshooting, and that's maybe going to have more detrimental implications for subsequent training sessions. Obviously, I would think like having a coach would be the gold standard. Generally speaking, you're literally paying someone to like make sure that you are training sufficiently hard, that process is being like, driven in the right direction. But for a lot of people, that's not feasible for a number of reasons: finances, time, whatever it might be, just might not be available to them, or they have an online coach, which is really popular. So I think getting a training partner, someone to train with, can very much mitigate some of the downfalls that we might face as individuals going into the gym, when it comes to making assessments of our own training, and how hard it is relative to where it should be, or the difficulty that we're trying to work towards.
Anything anybody wants to add to that?
I saw a really interesting adult film once called Internal Accountability, FOD.
5.
In the first 4, but 5 was very, people were held very accountable internally, I might add.
We'll get that linked in the description below.
And Mike, to backtrack to the topic of intensity of effort and those two different approaches that people might find themselves, or situations people might find themselves in, training too hard, too often, or not hard enough. And we've sort of covered the not hard enough side of things. So how do we get somebody who is a complete animal, attacks the eye and, recklessly, so to speak, in terms of their intensity of effort? They're just training hard, and they're never dialing back, not taking deloads. I've even seen a lot of folk training 7 days a week, quite intensely, not under my advice or anything like that, but I have seen a lot of competitive athletes when I've spoken to them. They're just in the gym every day, and their rest days are like, they're training abs and things like this. So they're not taking complete rest, and deloads, I would presume, are something that they're not doing either. And most of their sets are taken to failure. Let's just say hypothetically they're doing all 3 of those things. What would your advice be and how would they go about dialing back enough to reap the rewards of a little bit of rest and recovery, but not so much that they then start missing out and leaving games on the table?
Yeah, could be a lot to say there. It depends on how much buy-in they have and how much they take you seriously and how much they'll do what you say. If they don't take you very seriously and they don't believe you, they think, oh, deloads, that's for lazy people. What you can do is you can find them in a probably pretty overreached state. And if you can talk them into taking like half a week of easy work, or half a week of even, or a whole week of deloading even, after that, you put them back on the same machines they were doing the week before, look up the reps they were doing in the weights, put in the same weights and watch them hit rep PR after rep PR because they've dropped fatigue for the first time in a long time. And then they go, oh my God. And you're going, see, they actually got stronger. Isn't that crazy? And a lot of times they'll be like, okay, you know things. I'm just going to do what you say. And that works really well. If they already have buy-in and you can tell them, hey, deload, sometimes that's great. And it doesn't solve every problem because they could still be going hard every session, way too hard. Then you just kind of introduce them to the RIR concept pretty easily. Just, 1 week after deloading, you walk around with them and you can't be there physically. You just have to tell them to do this themselves, which is tough, but sometimes it works. You say, hey, listen, when you think you have like 3 or 4 more reps, just stop, write down how many reps you got. And then next week, you just increase the weight, do the same reps, or increase rep by 1 and keep going. And let me know when you hit failure. And first, they'll be like, oh, I don't know about all this. But then they'll soon start again later in that month hitting mega PRs because they're not a crazy amount of fatigue. They'll be getting really insane pumps because they're not damaged and overreached all the time. Psychologically, they'll even like training more. And all of a sudden, they might be onto something that they like. So I would say that was a good way. I'd also mention that if their technique starts to break down towards the end of each one of their sets, because a lot of the team no days off people, they like do actually go to failure and then they go to technical failure and then they go to moron failure. And it's probably a good idea to get them to stop going to moron failure first. So you say, okay, we consider it failure when you can't move the weight with proper technique. And all of a sudden, you've taken away from their program. They're still going to failure. But you've taken away tons of forced reps. And their fatigue is going to start to drop like crazy. And all of a sudden, they feel way better. They're way safer. And then in a few months, you can say, hey, now that you've trained to failure for a while and not more on failure, then maybe we can try some RIR stuff. And you say, RIR is lame. Pussies use RIR. And they're right. So then you just go back to training one set to fail once every 5 weeks, like the heck guys. I'm just kidding. So, at some point, a big thing. I think if folks listening to want some insight out of this, it's not jokes about adult films. I'd say one big thing is when you're coaching people or you're interacting with people, you understand that for neurological reasons and sociological reasons, people have a pretty narrow bandwidth for advice, even if it's the advice they really care about. Um, One thing you'll find that as you become more and more expert, you will spill a lot of pointless advice on people that will never use it or you use a small fraction of it. So it's good to be stingy with your advice. Isn't that typical? Your Jew guest is recommending being stingy. How's that? We've made full circle. But in all seriousness, we could say, hey, look, what you could try is just stopping when your technique starts to go. And that's the only thing you tell them. And then weeks later, they're like, dude, it's been working really well. I'm like healthier. My shoulder feels better because I'm not doing crazy shit anymore. What else you got? And you go, oh, how about this RIR thing? Try 3RR. They go, I don't know. But if you told them both the technique thing and the RIR thing at the same time, they're like, dude, they would try it maybe even for a few days and like, dude, I'm training a little bitch. I can't have a list. And they start capping their sets with failure crap and bad technique. So I'd say whatever technique, especially to get the crazies away from the fire, you got to do one little step at a time and you got to give them recommendations that show them how well it works. But I'd say the first thing is probably try to get them to do a little bit better technique, fail at technique with good technique. Then later you could try to get them to do a few days of very light stuff, come back and see that they're stronger. And then if they can do those things, they'll really start to be like, wow, this stuff works. Then you can slap them with RIR because RIR requires consistency. Because it's very easy for people to do a week of 3 RIR training and be like, that was really good. And then next week they come in and they're like, man, fuck this 1 rep PR shit. I'm going to PR by 5 reps. And they do, but then they're back to just going failure all the time. So one little step at a time is really good. And I'll tell you this, folks that can't take one little step at a time, they're not worth giving advice to anyway because they'll never amount to shit. If folks are in it for the long haul anyway, they'll be around for a long time. To take one step at a time advice. And I know it's awful too when you have genetically gifted people that really seem motivated and they're doing a lot wrong. You just want to shake the fuck out of them and tell them, listen, like I know all these things, I can make you so much better, but they don't know that. And their method of assessment of what imperfect as it may be, definitely is no magical way to mind meld and be like, look, I know. Do you know now? And you're like, yes, I know. So you just have to dish out the advice little by little, and as they catch on and think that, oh, it worked rather well, then they continue to move on.
Yes, I think there's a saying, you don't cast pearls at swine, meaning that you don't throw your pearls of wisdom at pigs because they don't appreciate it. They just want to roll around in the mud.
Typical bodybuilding gym.
All right. So that covers the intermediate stage for, I guess, the fundamental mistakes that people will make or issues they'll face. What about the roadblocks towards the advanced stage, Mike, besides tenure with the iron? What would be, besides that, what would be the roadblock that you see most commonly?
Probably appropriate understanding, at least intuitively, without stupid symbols that we made up at RP, but an intuitive understanding of the stimulus to fatigue ratio and powered by the mind muscle connection. Like if you're still bench pressing with a barbell and you honestly can't say it really hits your pecs much, it makes your shoulders hurt a lot and it gives you a hell of a tricep and front delt pump, but doesn't really fuck your pecs up. And it's just something you bench. That's what you do. What people do. How you get a big chest. You read it in a Flex magazine some years back, and that's just what you're doing. Then all of a sudden, you're not really advanced because one of the true definitions of advanced is understanding how to target the muscle with proper technique, of course. You perceive that the muscle is being put under large degrees of tension and or burn. And that's how you tell, like, am I getting hit? And there's a bunch of other proxies. And then finding the specific exercises, the techniques within those exercises, and the repetition ranges, and even the cadence and execution styles that let you check off a lot of the stimulus boxes with the fewest fatigue boxes. And all of a sudden, you may not be using the conventional exercises you used to, but you're using the best exercises that literally, in any remotely quantitative way that's not measuring muscle growth directly, actually do the job really well. For example, guys will, with really, really long femurs and short torsos, will squat, 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 squat. As a beginner, that's great. As an intermediate, that's pretty good. As an advanced, you may find that you're just doing good mornings at that point, and your posterior chain's real big because you're a good morning all the time. But your quads can't actually, your knees can't go through a large degree of flexion because you would never stand up again. And the limiting factor is always a posterior chain. So your quads are like 6 reps in reserve when your lower back and hamstrings are like at 0 reps in reserve. And so every squat like that doesn't quite do it for you. And if you're intermediate still, you just keep squatting. But if you're advanced, you go, you know what, man, my quads never really get a huge pump. I don't get very sore from squatting. And what the hell is it I'm doing in here if that's not happening? I don't even feel a lot of tension in my quads, to be honest. It's all in my glutes and my lower back. So maybe you try some hack squats. And all of a sudden, you're like, hack squats really are just a fucking jam for me. My knees feel great. I can get super, super deep. I don't get any back anything. I can produce a ton of force. I mean, lift a ton of weight. And every time I do them, my quads get super pumped, super sore. When they recover, they're just bigger and stronger, and they just keep going. And then you look back at the squat rack and you're like, squat. And you could still squat, but probably after some kind of pre-exhaust so that you can have the quads as a limiting factor and not worry about your back taking over. And while to the outside perspective, that may be like, hey, why don't you ever squat anymore, pussy? Like you haven't hit a squat PR in years. You may retort and say, listen, I'm here to stimulate muscle fibers, and I'm going to do that in the best way possible with the smallest fatigue price possible. And at that point, you might do what a lot of bodybuilders do, as another example, is to remove some exercises mostly or wholly, like deadlifts. A lot of bodybuilders don't do deadlifts. Why? Well, it's like, what exactly is growing when you're doing deadlifts? It's like, well, the back grows pretty well, but the fatigue cost is enormous. And then you say, okay, what about barbell bent rows with really, really good technique? Like, geez, do you really get a bigger back pump deadlifting than barbell rowing? No, you don't. It may be the same. Probably barbell rows are even better. And you can ask the question of how fatigued do barbell rows make? Feel like pretty fatigued, but geez, not like deadlifts. Then why are you deadlifting, right? And if you're a beginner, deadlifting is just good to put meat on your bones. If you're intermediate, deadlifts work well for you. Hey, knock it, keep going. But When you're advanced, you have to give things a little bit more thought to understand that things may not work automatically anymore. Now you're so big and so strong that your joints will pay the price before you get any kind of benefit if you're doing exercises that just don't fit your body and techniques that don't do you justice and so on and so forth. So I would say that quote unquote listening to your body shit, that really starts to become a thing when you're more advanced. And if you don't make that change, your career could be a lot shorter. And if you do make that change, you could just get way bigger and leaner because you're not doing things that you're supposed to be doing, quote unquote. You're doing things that actually work best for you and maybe don't work very well for many other people.
What would your advice be to somebody who is wanting to become more, or is at that phase in their training, and they're probably not as intuitive with their body, their lifting, as what they need to be to progress to, you know, the next stage in their lifting career? What would your advice be, Mike?
So first have really good technique, at least fundamental technique, and then make sure you're training hard, which means, approaching pretty close to failure. And then once you have those down, try to monitor how much stimulus and fatigue an exercise is giving you, at least in some semi-objective way. Ask yourself, like, is this exercise, when I do curls this way, do I feel tension in the biceps or do I feel it in the forearms? You guys ever done curls before where you feel it in your forearms and you're like, someone's like biceps, right? You're like, on paper, yes, I'm training biceps, but I'm not sure what I'm training, to be honest. Things like that. How much or tension are you feeling in high repetition exercises for that muscle group? Are you feeling the burn? Like if someone's saying, "Hey, man, lunges are for glutes," and the more lunges you do, the more your quads are on fire and your glutes don't feel like anything. You're like, are they really for glutes? Like, I'm not sure. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And then another one is soreness. Like if you just totally trash a muscle group, a certain exercise, and then that muscle group doesn't get sore, but another one gets sore, they're like, oh, I don't know if this is the best exercise for XYZ. It still could be. But if all those line up, like say you're doing lateral raises and you don't feel any tension in your side delts, high reps, you don't even feel a burn in your side delts. You, are getting a pump only in your traps or only in your like forearm extensors. And then you're also just not getting, a huge amount of soreness or even fatigue seemingly in the side delts. Then that's it may be the greatest thing in the world. And you should also pay attention to markers for fatigue, which is generally two. We split them up into three, but the two big ones are like, how much systemic fatigue is the exercise causing? Like after a set of side laterals, are you like really just beat up and someone's like, hey, bicep curls now? You're like, I just need to take the day off and die of old age. Or you're like, yeah, I feel pretty decent. Let's do more stuff. If side laterals really, really beat you up as far as systemic fatigue, they had better check some of the other boxes of tension and pump and soreness and so on and so forth. And then on the other end, there's just joint and connective tissue fatigue. So if you're doing side laterals, you're like, dude, my shoulders are fucking killing me. And someone's like, great, we're training shoulders. Like, no, I understand. My glenohumeral joint is in pain. But it's not really that great. That's probably not that great anyway. But, if it's something just a little bit moderate pain, it goes away after each workout, it never accumulates. It's kind of the cost of doing business, but hey, business better be fucking good. Your side delts better be getting a huge pump, maybe not getting sore, so not mechanically really like leverage for that, but at least a big pump, and at least you better finish a set of side laterals, and someone asks you, hey, how'd you feel? You got to be like, I can't even lift my arms right now because my side delts like are still accumulating lactate. Like I'll try to walk home from the gym after a good shoulder workout, and I'll have to like lean out a trash can so that my side delts, like even if my arms are to my sides, they won't let go of their lactic acid. They're still producing it faster than letting go. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, I'm just going to die of lactic acid right here in front of the gym. And then the autopsy will say that I was a drug addict and all this other crazy shit. So basically, you have to be checking the stimulus boxes in such a manner and not checking the fatigue boxes a ton. And if you go through, like we all do different exercises all the time anyway, so you just go through all your exercises that you do and say which ones are scoring a bit higher on that stimulus to fatigue ratio, which ones are kind of scoring like shit. Like if you're like always doing, let's say, underhand pull-ups with your training partner, that's some shit you do, and they're like, what do you think? Underhand pull-ups today? And you're like, you guys, my elbows always hurt for like fucking weeks after we do these. I can't ever feel my fucking lats. I don't get a pump. I don't even know what the fuck we're here. My biceps kind of get a pump, but like my forearms just kill me and my elbows kill me. But then overhand wide pull-ups, you just feel it like only in your lats, and it's unbelievable. And 3 sets later, dude, I can't even put my arms down on my sides, and someone's like, how are your shoulders? Amazing. I can't even feel shit. Gee, like it seems like you probably should just do more wide grip stuff and less underhand stuff. And if you ever come back to underhand, you better rework your technique somehow. Something has to change. Craziest thing in the world to me, and I'm sure you guys have your own stories about this, is guys that in the way in which they're executing a certain exercise, clearly the stimulus to fatigue ratio is just awful for them. But like fucking moths to light, they just keep coming back to it. Like, yeah, I got hurt last week doing deadlifts, but that doesn't build itself. We're doing fucking rack pulls today. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Try to figure out some different approach because you got to be checking those boxes. If they don't check them, if you don't check them, they don't check themselves.
Roger that, Mike. All right, let's go around each of you guys and hear which exercises you found that you were doing for however long to be very unfavorable in terms of the stimulus to fatigue, and what exercise was that, and then what substitution did you make? So we'll start with you, Mike. What was a game changer in terms of the SFR?
The bad way.
The bad way, and then what was the solution?
Low bar squats.
Yeah.
The solution was to no longer low bar squat.
Yeah. Well, what exercise was the solution? Well, just no low bar squats whatsoever, and just stop training.
Like, just don't squat.
Don't squat.
High bar squats was great because I would do both, and low bar you can load better. And I was still powerlifting at the time a little bit, and I
saw you used a cambered bar for a while. Yeah.
So yeah, so now I can't really properly do high bar squats either because I've gotten sufficiently immobile and jacked that I can't grab a bar properly. So now I'm onto the cambered bar, which feels amazing, and it's even better than regular bar. So I just have to contort myself into weird exercises. I can't do human ones anymore. Which, funny enough, like you see some of the really really big pros training in kind of weird ways. Like, why is he putting his hands on that part of the machine? Like Rolly Winkler, I'm quite convinced can't wipe his own ass, can't touch his own face at this point. Of course, he has to do exercises differently. Now, maybe some of that is ignorance. Maybe he could be doing them better. But like, I'm finding myself doing some exercises in ways that I've only ever seen like guys that are really, really jacked do. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's because I'm jacked now and I just can't do the shit I used to do. So for me, the transition from low bar to high bar, and then from high bar to camber bar squats or safety squats was like a huge thing. Because at the end of the day, listen, for bodybuilding hypertrophy, you want big legs. It doesn't matter where the fuck the bar goes or how much you can lift. It matters, are you getting the stimulus to your quads, and at what expense of fatigue to the rest of you? And for me, low bar was like a great way to either hurt my my wrists, my elbows, my shoulders, or my back, or my hips. It was a pick. It was like a roulette wheel. And when you lean onto one of those, it gets hurt. And when you lean away from it, other things get hurt. So for me, I was like, why the fuck am I doing this song and dance? And I stopped doing it. My quads got way, way, way bigger. And they got stronger too. I just can't low bar squat as much because I don't practice low bar squat.
Awesome. Jackson?
Yeah, so I can't straight barbell curl. It's absolutely shit for me. Like, it just jacks up my forearms and my wrist, and like I can't get it in the biceps. And I used to fucking quarrel with myself for ages and just say, like, man the fuck up. Everyone does barbell curls to biceps. But finally sort of put it to the wayside and replace it with either like cambered bar curls or like dumbbell curls where I can get my wrist in a more comfortable position, and then I can actually like really activate my biceps the way I want it to.
Awesome.
I had the same thing happen, by the way. That's a big deal.
I had the same, funnily enough, with dumbbells. For some reason, dumbbells, because I don't know if you guys have seen my forearms. My forearms are quite prominent in comparison. Self-love, a lot of self-compassion, Mike. And I really struggle to feel my biceps with dumbbells for some unbeknown reason to me. But yeah, the stirrups at a higher angle, they seem to do the job. Preacher curls, things like that, and cables as well. So interesting, Jackson. I feel you on that one. The straight barbell curls, bit of a bitch. Samuel?
I'm trying to think of like an upper body one, because obviously lower body exercises are just going to be like the way we load things like RDLs or deads, even squat variations. It's like they're a lot more just inherently fatiguing. I would say, like echo what Mike said. I kind of moved away from, particularly in the last couple of blocks, really moving away from any kind of like squatting. And I've been doing like
you mean free weight squats?
Yeah, like barbell squatting. I moved away from a lot of barbell squatting because I guess something a lot of people don't consider is as you get stronger, right? Not like if you want to be jacked, to a degree you don't want to be that strong because the loads you need to lift just become higher and higher to get that stimulus, and it's a fucking pain. I'm not strong now. Like I don't feel that way in any way, shape or form, but the weights I would need to lift to get sufficient training volume into, say, my quads or something would be high, or for a stupid number of reps that it's just like nearly impractical. And I found, and that's after like, 7 years of powerlifting, dedicating that all my time and attention to that. So I've found that moving away from like squatting nearly entirely with like free weights to things like leg press and even hack squat, and then adding a band, so I can reduce the load, has been like an absolute game changer in the last like probably 6 months or longer, just because you can kind of set yourself in. Using the bands has been a good way to add extra like stimulus to where you would otherwise would have less. So on the leg press, we've been like leg pressing with the thickest bands we have in the gym. And it's like, as it gets to the top, it is fucking brutal on the quads, but nowhere else. And I've found that, other times I get hip issues or lower back issues. So it's been a really good way to move away from it. So that's fine. So from just moving from like barbell squatting for hypertrophy more towards, just any exercise that we can probably adjust the strength curve and the loads just to better manage fatigue, really. But I wanted to say one thing, like on Jackson's point about like barbells and stuff like that. I always think like people forget that machines and equipment, like anything in the gym, has like a degree of conformity required to be able to use it. Like even an easy bar, it's like, it's got the bends in it to make it more comfortable, but you still have to be able to get your wrists in the right position. You still have to be able to hold it with two hands. And a lot of my clients are always like, oh, isn't this better than this? And it's like, well, frankly, no, nothing's better. You should be, kind of chasing what feels best for you, because, like we said earlier, if you're doing bicep curls and feel nothing but like forearms, it's like, how good is that for the bicep? Why can't you just change it to something else? Like, what's the point in like really sticking something out? But I do think at a point, maybe you give something, some time of day to trial it out and see how it goes, and don't just chalk it up to it's not for me after one attempt. You have to go through a degree of learning and trialing it out. But yeah, very, very much think a lot of people generally, and this is probably a good way that people would actually advance from, say that, well, through the intermediate stage and into the advanced stage, would be by being more deliberate in, what is my goal? What is going to best facilitate that in the gym? And then not getting married to, certain exercises or certain rep numbers or, certain weights, and just being more intuitive in making those adjustments that align with what they're trying to actually achieve, instead of just being like, no, I'm low bar squatting because low bar squats are the best. It's like, well, maybe they won't be at a point and you might need to address that.
Yeah. Yep. Mike, I have a question for you on people avoiding rep ranges. So 1 to 5 reps is, 1 to 6 reps, depending on where you look, is the strength rep range. And then 8 to 12 is hypertrophy. What happened to 7? It's like the Bermuda Triangle of fucking rep ranges, man. It's like, is it strength? Is it hypertrophy? Is it powerless? But what are we getting? What's the deal there, Mike? Give the listeners some history.
There's a good answer. 7 is in many cultures considered a lucky number, but in lifting, it's the opposite. So it's a terrible number that you never do, because it really just illustrates a lack of fundamental morality. People do what's proper, and what's proper is sets of 1 to 6 or sets of 8 to 12. Like you eat with a fork or you use a spoon. Spork is this cafeteria implement for children that adults don't use, and adults don't do sets of 7 because it just doesn't reflect well on you, and people will know. It's like going to a rich people gala with a shitty knockoff fur coat. Like everyone knows, and everyone doesn't like you.
It's like getting a bubble bath massage in Thailand kind of deal.
Nope, I don't know what you're talking about. That seems like paradise.
All right.
Good people go and do that. Good, great people. Nobody in this podcast, of course, but I've heard story. All I'll say,
All right. Anything you want to add to the discussion, Mike, at this point?
So, self-promotion aside, on our Renaissance Consultation YouTube, we really actually have videos called like troubleshooting guides for hypertrophy and strength and all this other stuff. And it's kind of cool to go in there and just make sure you're kind of checking the boxes. And if there's a few boxes in there, it's like 10 troubleshooting tips per video. And if you're just really not checking a few of them, maybe you can, and maybe it'll be a pretty simple way out. I will say that of all the folks I've ever talked to about troubleshooting and they're having a hard time making gains, um, say a good fraction of it is just you genetically suck and you just realizing that. Another good fraction of it is problems that are quite simple and you're doing something very wrong, and you could very easily fix it by stopping doing the wrong thing and do the right thing. And only a very small number of problems, especially after some dedicated work, are truly mysterious. Very, very rare to have those. So a lot of times when you're having a struggle and you're having trouble improving, you could think of yourself as the special case and Jesus, how come my XYZ lift won't go up? How come I can't add muscle to my biceps? Blah, blah. But short of the, just dealing with the genetics that the good man upstairs gave you, it's probably a solvable problem. And it's probably not even that complicated, but it may require you to understand at least sort of what a hard progressively and listen to your body until you can't go anymore, then reduce the fatigue, then come back. Pay attention to what exercises really stimulate your muscles and which ones just kind of fatigue everything and hurt your joints, stuff like that. And if you're not doing stuff like that, then all the gains you were getting was just because you had sweet genetics and pretty good consistency.
Did it take
Hello?
over an hour?
No, but this is a paid
Sorry,
account,
man.
so we just lost a little bit of what Mike said. That's real weird. Like Mike was still talking on my end and then it just like dropped out completely.
That's strange. All right, so
Any
Mike,
case,
where were you at?
if anyone has ever gotten more jacked than you and they seem to have potentially solved your problem, it's probably a good idea to think that maybe the problem is solvable. And if they've tried some things you haven't tried yet, try some things that they've tried, in a lot of places and in a lot of situations, you're probably not the first person to encounter this problem, especially now with the internet. There's probably a lot of people talking about this problem, and it's still really funny to me. Sometimes people ask what I call yelling into the void when you ask a question as a commenter on a YouTube video, just to the void. You're like, oh, I'm having trouble with my knee. Any tips? And no one answers. So like, you're not asking any one specific human being. You could have just YouTubed for like 3 or 4 hours in your spare time and probably found your answer. You could have thought through it and probably found your answer. Or you could have like found some guy with 2,000 Instagram followers who lifts weights pretty well and be like, hey, can I pay you $50 to talk to you for an hour or two? And he'll be like, fuck yeah. And then you say, listen, my knee hurts. What do I do? And he might give you a 5-point list of shit that used to work for him. So a lot of times folks think they have this big mysterious problem on their hands and they're the first person to ever plateau. You might not. And it's probably solvable. Now, it might not be solvable, but that's pretty rare. And or you might just be figuring out that what you call a plateau is just you used to gain 50 kilos, every 6 months on your lifts, and now you're only gaining 25. And that's just genetics and training time.
Sweet. Let's wrap up that discussion and move into the questions. Jackson's got some absolute
I've got them all here, Jackson.
doozies. Yep. And we'll get those to Mike.
Okay. So I'm just going to read them one by one. There's no other way to read them, I guess. Which Dragon Ball Z character is Mike most like in real life?
See, I want to say
customary for you to insult your guests.
Yeah, in Australia,
offended.
yes.
Oh, well, then I feel normal and
you
welcome.
feel like yes, you've been treated appropriately. So when I initially read this question, I was like, fuck. Like Krillin comes to mind, but you kind of have King Kai or someone like that who's kind of just like, kind of sits up in his own little world.
King Kai's a good one. You know
Like,
who he, if I've always said Mike looks like the Juggernaut from Marvel. You know who does look out of Dragon Ball Z? You know the android that Vegeta, I forget the number, it's like 14 or 12, something like that. The one that Vegeta cuts its head off?
Yeah.
The fat one?
Like, he's not fat, but he's got like a big round
Nah,
head.
it's not Android 14.
Is it Android 14?
Nah. Android 19. So yeah, we go back up. Android
That's
19.
the fat one.
Yeah. It's
Fuck you,
shapely.
Jackson.
You could be Boo on a good day.
Okay.
Which
Tell-
Boo? Hold
Tell
on.
me this doesn't look a bit like Mike.
I hate you. I honestly, you guys can all go to
Jack.
hell.
He's Jack.
At least
No,
I
he's
called you
not.
a king. Well, he lost to Vegeta in like a very swift way.
He did talk really cool.
Look at those quads. There's some
Fuck
big ass
you.
quads.
Those aren't
Nah,
quads.
they're
Those are
not
fat
quads.
people legs.
Yeah, they're fat pants for sure. All right, Mike, who do you think you're most like then?
Probably that guy. You know.
That guy. Okay. Everyone, this one's to everyone. Your go-to McDonald's order. Jacob, you can start. You're muted, so you're gonna have to unmute
Audio's
yourself.
off.
Yeah. What's mine called? It's the grilled chicken clubhouse or spicy grilled chicken clubhouse, something like that, with a double chicken patty, hold the mayo, and extra cheese. Yeah.
Jacob, do you request the double chicken patty? Is it normally
Yeah.
single? Do you
No,
make it
I request the double chicken.
Is that
yeah.
like a fucking cocksucker request with a for sure jizz in your food? If you're like double a chicken patty, like this guy's an idiot.
Well, do you know what, Mike? Probably 2, 3.
That's why
I'd
it's
even
so
say
jacked.
4 years ago. When I used to ask for double chicken, I used to always get the eye rolls and then sort of look at each other, and I was like, "Yeah, these idiots are going to spit in my burger for sure." But
That's why
now,
it's got the whole just to make sure they're not.
yeah, it's easily identifiable if you hold mayo. So now I think it's much more commonplace. I think grilled chicken has become very much sought after here in Australia anyway. Whereas when I first started ordering the grilled chicken, when it was only available in like one meal, maybe, it was a pain in the ass for them. So yeah, I probably have had a bit of McDonald's employee come in my burgers at some point.
And that's where the extra protein comes from. So he's getting triple protein all in one go. All right, Jackson, your go-to McDonald's meal. Give us the Indonesian one if you've had a Mac as while you're over there. I'm sure you want to think about this while you're also dieting.
They have some weird combos here, like they have like nasi goreng at McDonald's, where you get like the fried chicken with the rice and egg.
It is Indonesia.
It's kind of shitty, I'm not gonna lie.
Jackson, are you in Indonesia right now?
I am.
Whatever so brings you to Indonesia?
Mike's not paying attention.
No, I just decided to move here. Like, remote business has been good. Lockdowns are happening in Australia every 3 weeks, and getting
COVID's
really
a myth in Indonesia.
of
Jackson, that's a fucking cop out. Perth had no lockdowns. We're in our fifth.
I've gone 3 weeks ago.
How long were you locked down for? Like 2 days.
We've still had like 6 lockdowns. They don't last long, but they're like getting 2 weeks.
You should have moved to Melbourne, come live with the boys, and had 6-month lockdowns. That's where it's at.
Fucking Melbourne, you motherfuckers are better than everyone. You know, Melburnians think they're better than all the other Australians, who, as far as they can tell, are like Crocodile Dundee. Like, yeah, that movie's actually about Australia. It's just about the rest of Australia. So, so they locked down forever until COVID's completely gone. I can believe it.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
in Indo, they just let the COVID flourish, because they can't lock down because people are only making a couple of dollars a day to like feed themselves. So you tell them to stay home and don't work, like they starve to their death and die. So we live relatively normal here. So weather's good. Neuro massages every now and again, and life is good.
The royal we.
and now you're McDonald's order.
If I had to, I'm dieting now, so I'm kind of hungry. If I had to have it today, I reckon I would go. I'm going to change it up and go breakfast food. I'm gonna go 1 bacon and egg McMuffin, 1 sausage and egg McMuffin, orange juice, 2
Variety.
hash browns, and hotcakes.
Damn. So just a snack.
Yeah.
Mike, I remember when you came out here for the UABC, you would, or like around that time, you were traveling a bit and you were trialing all the foods of McDonald's around the world. Your
Yes, I
go-to,
remember that.
give us the best meal that you had. Like, what was it? If the most memorable one?
Anywhere in the world?
Was it in
Yeah, anywhere in the
Thailand?
world.
I remember it was somewhere that I couldn't
It's
believe.
McDonald's now.
Yeah. Get out of here, Ronald. You fucking pedophile. You guys have Ronald McDonald? Is he a global thing or just an American
Yeah.
thing? He's global.
He's global pedophile, man.
Good. Yeah, Epstein was global too. You feel me? So, I've been impressed by McDonald's everywhere. I do have a memorable McDonald's meal. I flew into Australia for the first time ever, Sydney Airport, and I was like, well, this seems like a fine airport. I should try their McDonald's. And sure enough, their McDonald's is what you would get at like an American second level burger place, like a really good burger. And I was like, oh my God. And the ingredients were all assembled quite well. And the order was flawless. And the quality of the meat was clearly superior. And I was like, man, Australian food is fucking sweet. And then I just was never disappointed. And then when I came down to Melbourne and tried the Melbourne breakfast, I was like, this is like the Elysian Fields. These people don't live in real life. They live in harmony with the elements because the food was that good. So I would say my first Australian McDonald's experience ranked up there with the highest ever McDonald's experiences. I will say I had another one in Switzerland. Their McDonald's cost about $100,000 per meal, but it was not worth that amount, but it was worth an amount close to that. So I would say that's really good. And my order at McDonald's is generally I go. I have a system. Of course, I have a system. Anywhere I go in the world, I have the McDonald's challenge, which is I have to have McDonald's in as many nations as possible. I usually get 1 local thing, 1 burger thing, and 1 chicken thing, and that's typically my order. You don't want to judge. One of the worst McDonald's experiences I ever had was unfortunately one of my favorite places in the world, which was Thailand.
Yes,
I got McDonald's, and it was so much of it was so spicy I couldn't eat it, and the rest of it was like, ugh, and I just gave the rest to Melissa Davis, who, as far as I can tell, can't really taste food. She eats anything that she's presented with if she's hungry. So that worked out well for her. But I was really kind of sour because you hear so much about how exotic Thailand is, how amazing the food is. And I was never disappointed with the Thai food, but maybe that specific McDonald's was just like the biggest letdown of maybe my entire life.
Damn.
Interesting.
Big call.
I remember something about Thailand McDonald's. I remember that was memorable for you at some point.
Okay. We all remember Mike's McDonald's adventures. My go-to order would be either a grilled chicken burger or a double quarter pounder and then 10 nuggets.
You can't. There are some things in life that are almost guaranteed. You can't really miss with a double quarter pounder and 10 nuggets. Like if that's not some shit you like, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you. Jackson,
I know, Jackson. I thought that was Mike's wife.
Something curious is happening again. Jackson, are you a king over there? You seem to have servants.
Oh my God, that was so funny. Mike's it's like Jackson muted himself as well. Like, just trying to hide away. All right, let's move on. So this is an interesting question. All right, we'll try and be directed with our answers here. How often can you have a meal outside of your macros and not pay for it? I guess anytime you eat a meal, it counts towards your macros and you're always paying for it. So never is my answer.
Have rich friends, and then you'll never have to pay for any food.
That's, well, yeah. Mike?
And if they're not stingy.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if you have rich Jewish friends, I mean, you're paying me interest on the food loan.
Are we literally talking about monetary payment? Yeah.
No.
No. They're talking about like how many times can you effectively break your diet? Yeah, so it's like my macro.
Yeah. What can you get away with?
Yeah, it sounds like this.
Go ahead.
Go on. I was gonna
This
just
is a
say, it
question
sounds
that's-
like, oh my god, go, you go. I'll shut up.
This is a question that's phrased in a moralistic way, in the entire entrepreneurship of diet is not moralistic. It's just functional. It's like, it's like asking, you're going on a mission on a fighter plane, you're going to bomb some country, and you're like, hey, commander, how many like barrel rolls can I do on the way and not pay for it? He's like, what do you mean pay for it? Get the job done. And then if you're barrel rolling in the sky, you might get shot out of the sky with a fucking missile, you dumb asshole. So ideally 0. But if you barrel roll when you start taking off the runway and everything's fine, then great. If you barrel roll 100 kilometers in, great. If you're barrel rolling, like approaching your combat target, it's a really bad idea. It's really stupid, and you potentially pay a lot, and you can get away with not paying much. So I would say that if you're very close to your contest, you're cheating. It's really, really, really terrible idea. If you're post show and you have nasty rebound tendencies, cheating is a really, really stupid idea. If you're at the peak of your mass phase and you can't stuff any more food into yourself, like fuck it, pizza, I think you pay almost nothing because you actually benefit a little because it increases the amount of tissue you're holding. So I would say that peak of mass, you can cheat a few times a week and go considerably over calories. And then the other days in which you go a little bit under because you're so thermogenic just from massing. You guys ever notice like massing, you're just sweating all the time? You're not
I miss
gonna
that.
net body fat. Yeah, right. No, I'm sure that's to you currently, alien. But yeah, so I'd say during massing and during maintenance and shit like that, like imagine during active rest, you say, how many cheat meals can I have? Like, I don't know, like infinity or whatever. Especially if you're not super, super hungry and your hormonal drive isn't leading you to chronically overconsume calories. I think you can have tons of cheat meals and be fine. But if you're 3 weeks out and you're like, dude, I need to cheat, what could I have? Like, can I go over macros? Will that be bad? Motherfucker, this isn't a it's not a fairy tale. There's no good or bad. There's like, do you want to take second or first? If you want to take first, shut the fuck up. If you want to take second, fuck, cheat away. Not to lash out at the question asker, who I'm sure was coming from a good place.
Jackson.
Agreed.
So like we know that there's a lot of high level pro bodybuilders that will have like the 1 or 2 cheat meals a week, but I wouldn't consider them falling sort of outside, like they're not counting macros, but it's still within the context of the plan. Like they're having these cheat meals, but it's still in line with some sort of targeted rate of progress, whether that's the visuals or the scale weight or something like that. So I think if we're having cheat meals, like you just get Wednesday comes around, you're like, fuck, I'm hungry, like screw it, I'm ordering a burger. Like that's those sort of things, they're going to really hurt you. But if it's in the context of the whole plan and they're sort of programmed at sort of a regular interval or something like that, and you're in line with your rate of progress, I think it can work.
One thing that always kills me is when people misuse the word cheat. Like, oh, it's a cheat day, but I planned it. Like, then it's not a fucking cheat day, is it? How on earth could it be? Like, if you're structuring it into your plan, your use of the English language is incorrect.
A very legal critique. That's really funny.
Yeah, people do it all the time. Like cheat day, but it's like, but you plan to have that cheat day. Your coach set it for you. Anyway, good morning, Jackson. Jackson goes on
Next
mute
question.
graciously again.
Jackson,
that was next question.
Hey Jackson, every day. I'm sorry to cut you off, Sam. Hey Jackson, every day I wake up, nobody telling me good morning. My wife will throw an object in my general direction. Nobody's cleaning my place. Motherfucker, where are you living? A castle? You got a castle?
That's the next episode. It's just a tour of Jackson's house.
Man, the property's cheap. The buyer's market right now in Indonesia.
Did you buy?
No, I'm renting.
Okay. I do have questions about the. Yeah, there you go. All right, next one. Fave actor or actress? I'll start. Mine's Jason Bateman. Jackson, go for it.
Why Jason?
I gotta Google my guy. Hold on a sec. Keep going.
Why Jason Bateman? Oh, he's just I love the way he fucking speaks. I love his witty sarcasm. He's just fucking good.
Yeah, he's dry.
I love it. Everything about him.
I'm going Denzel.
I'm going Denzel. That was a statement. That wasn't even just like an answer. That was a statement. You like laid down the gauntlet there, Jackson. I like that. Why
Jacob,
Denzel?
You tell me a bad Denzel movie doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to hear it.
Well, I would have a similar why for my character. He's not a really character. He's a real human. Leonardo DiCaprio. I think yeah, you can't fault him.
He's a good man. Mike, did you
I'm
Google
gonna go
successfully?
off reservation here and say Michael Shannon. Who's that?
Who the fuck
Yeah.
is Michael?
I bet it's a
Do
porn
you
star or
guys
something
remember
like that.
the movie in like 2013 Superman with Henry Cavill?
Yeah.
He was
Okay.
General
Oh,
Zod.
yeah. Okay. He looks
He's
a
the
lot.
guy that,
Go on. Sorry.
yeah,
Michael
he's the
Shannon.
guy that yelled, "I will find him! I will find him! I will find him!" Hey, dude, shut the fuck up! Somebody ice this guy. Jesus Christ, just say the same thing over and over again. But phenomenal actor, and everything he's in, he just acts his ass off. I mean, he could.
Just
I was gonna
he
say
puts it
Arnold or some
in.
shit like that, but let's be honest.
He
He goes
he
to work.
looks like Theon Greyjoy from Game of Thrones.
I don't. I don't do
You
the
can
Game of
just
Thrones things. I have
Google
like
Theon
friends.
Greyjoy and just tell me that they don't look identical.
I'm
Okay.
really quite fine without googling anything.
That's fine.
But because we're friends, what is his name?
We're gonna speak to
Theon.
Theon, Theon Greyjoy.
Theon, stupid made up name, like stupid made. Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Except Michael Shannon would be like a phenomenally better looking version of that guy who's also manlier and every way better. But yes, you're right.
Naturally. While you're Googling that, the next question, does being tall affect training volume and exercise selection? Of course it does. If you were 6'5" doing RDLs, squats, bench press, you just have to move heavy objects a lot further than anyone else. And equally, if you're really short, you don't have to. You know, there's a couple of like dwarves who like, I don't know if that's the correct way to refer to them. I
Technically, they have
apologize.
dwarfism, so sure.
Yeah, okay.
Little people.
Competing in powerlifting in Australia, and boy, one of the dudes, Kevin Gray, fucking good dude, squats like 250 something. Pure insanity. Find me. It's like, and again, like who did that at like 50 something kilos, like weighing like 50. So it's like nearly a 5 times body weight squat or 4.5.
Nah, I'm pretty sure it was 62 kilo class.
There you go, close to the 50s. Still an obscene amount of weight. So yeah, being tall does affect training volume and exercise selection. Does anyone else want to add anything to that, or we still got a few questions to get through? We might not get through them all.
I think that was sufficient.
Yeah, let's just move. Any tips for a hard gainer? Eat more. Mike, you're gaining right now by the sounds of everything. Do you want to give someone?
If you're very curious, get a copy of the book Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy Training. It's not very expensive. Or go to the Renaissance Periodization YouTube. Just type in Mike Israetel, butcher my name. The YouTube autocorrect algorithm will catch it. And type in hypertrophy made simple. And there's tons of advice and tons of offshoot videos. You're going to go on a learning journey, and you're going to realize there's about 1,000 ways that hard gainers can help themselves, but we can't do any justice to summary right now. Other than eat more and train properly. The next question is how much more and what is properly. When all that information is available either through books or free YouTube videos. So get at it. Get some learning going.
Concise. Is there evidence supporting multiple transportable carbs within peri-workout nutrition? Jackson, I'm going to send that one to you.
So I assume by multiple transportable, they're talking about like glucose, fructose combos and things like that. So like people like to pull the studies which show like better glycogen replenishment when there's like a combo of glucose and fructose. But what people tend to forget is like table sugar, like sucrose, it has glucose and fructose in it. So a lot of the time, the carbohydrates that we're having sort of post-workout, whether having cereal or something like that, or some of those quick carbs that we'll be having around the workout window, it's got glucose and it's got multiple transportable forms in it anyway. So I don't really think like we need to be too sort of creative when it comes to this stuff. As long as we're getting simple carbs, we're getting multiple sources anyway.
Unless you're endurance cycling, that probably isn't a big deal. If you're endurance cycling, it's a huge deal. and then there's tons of very specific advice you can take.
Cool.
Cool. Next. Favorite holiday destination. Holiday destination.
Bali.
Okay.
Pigeonholed
Bali.
himself there.
Mike, favorite holiday destination.
London, the United Kingdom.
Nice, Jacob.
Also Bali.
Why? Why, Mike?
I have a spirit bond with London. I've never had a bad time in London. I don't ever plan on it. I'll tell you guys why. As soon as I land in the airport, I start to hear amazing accents, and they can say anything, and it's great. Very similar experience in Australia, by the way. And I get off the plane, and I walk to Heathrow Airport. I literally have like this turn I make, and there's this little like convenience store, like a petrol station convenience store, but with no petrol station. You guys say petrol station down there. So, and I just buy all these weird British snacks, and they're so amazing, and they have shrimp sandwiches, some shit we just don't have in America. Like, you don't buy that at a fucking 7-Eleven. And it's wonderful. And then I go and get a cab. It looks like the cab Harry fucking Potter takes. And I talk to the guy, and I can barely understand what he's saying. It was ostensibly English, and the architecture is amazing, and everything's fucking. Steve Hall's there, and Steve Hall, and he's great. And everyone in England's either like really snappy and catty or really super polite. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful all around. And also another cool thing is you walk around London, is every fucking race and creed and color of mankind is there, and just being regular people. And it's just like truly, I think, the most global city, and I just love it. I love, even because I'm Russian, I love the dreary weather. It's like 15 degrees and like a mild drizzle, and I'm like, paradise. And it was an odd holiday destination, but nonetheless, it's where my heart lives.
If anyone wants the extended version
Fantastic.
of Mike's answer to a 3-word question, we'll post that in the show notes. Okay, we're going to do 2 final questions. No more than a sentence response each is required, and only one of them is directed at you, Mike. So we'll go the first one that's for all of us. If you could put yourself in any movie universe, what would you choose? Jackson. I just say any show universe, like any fake universe. Like, why has it got to be movies? Anyway, pick a universe.
I think it's a good question, bro.
If you could place yourself in any movie universe or any fantasy universe, or fake
Have you
universe.
seen the Fifth Element with Bruce Willis?
Good
Yeah.
That
answer.
place is fucking dope. Like,
So
living
dope.
there would be sick.
That's a good one. Jacob?
Whatever that world is in Avatar. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Interesting.
Just want to live out in the jungle.
Yeah. Yeah.
no.
Like, personally, I'd go something like more along the anime realms. Like, imagine living in the same universe as like Goku, where it's like you actually have different planets that you can go to, and that shit wasn't legit.
But
Otherwise,
you'd be beta as fuck. You're just assuming you have Saiyan level powers.
no, just to live in that world, that'd be fucking elite.
The humans are losers there. They get fucked up by everyone.
But Goku saves them every single time, like legit.
I don't know. There's a ton of planets that Frieza gets to before Goku does shit about it.
Yeah, but not to Earth. Not to Earth.
Hey, but you didn't say Earth. You said other planets and shit.
Universe.
I'm just saying that the universe has other planets. Failing that, I would say the Pokemon universe. Like, fucking, that would be mint. Who didn't play Pokemon as a kid and grow up wishing that they could live that life? And just imagine, like, you walk outside and you could just like,
I did.
fucking, and you could just
If
like
you play Pokemon Go, you could just live there anytime you want.
look, Mike. I played a lot of Pokemon Go. I don't want to get into that
You don't
right now.
feel like you live there.
I'm recovering. I'm a recovering addict. Okay.
My
Go on,
answer is
Mike.
super simple. It's Star Wars universe, but I get Dragon Ball Z powers. I've thought this
Very
through a
simple.
lot.
Yeah, you did. See, that was the caveat on my first response. I should have just requested Saiyan powers. All right. The last one to wrap it up. I want to hear Mike's best pickup line.
Well, I laughed when I saw this one.
So Mike, you're going to cap us out. Your best
Yeah,
pickup line. How did you swoon the love of your life?
Oh, that's a more complex story. But a really good pickup line you could try is the following. It's not even a line. Ready? Because number one thing that doesn't get you laid is sweating these hoes out here. If you're impressed and the bitch can tell, you're done. But if the first thing she hears out of you, she's like, "Oh my God, you're that guy on the internet," right? You go, she's like, "Oh my God, he's not taking it seriously. What do I have to do to prove myself?" All of a sudden, you're in Bali and things are going well.
So good. All right.
Oh.
Well, that concludes.
Jackson, what's your pickup line? I just want to hear what Jackson's
Okay.
best pickup line will be.
Yes, $10 for that, and
I'll take a number 1 and number 7 and number 13.
All you need to say is 300,000 rupiah, and
I have money. I'll pay. That should,
No limit credit card.
that gets you around. All right. Well, that's everything for today. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. Hopefully it wasn't a bad way to spend, I think it's your afternoon. That's it. Appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I'll send you the pre-show recording as well, and you can do with it what you will.
You could just never record that. You just throw that away.
That's all we publish. That's the whole thing.
That'd be amazing. That wouldn't let anyone down. It puts a little bit of pressure on Jared, but
yeah, and true. I'm sure he can live up to it though, and he'll be fine. All right,
guys.
See everyone.
I'll speak
Thank
to you all
you.
soon. Thank you for your time.
see you guys. Thanks a lot.
Catch ya.